Recording in progress.
Okay, moving along here. That was really exciting.
I was boring myself.
Anyway, um, let's get into the meat of why you're on the show. We've actually talked quite a bit about your performing, but I mean, it's interesting. We had a conversation on Facebook, and this is why I kind of wanted you on the show about our best and least favorite Beatles songs and things like that. Now, you said you must have seen whatever it was. You have to tell me whatever it was that I did with Plastic. Was it an episode with him? And you mentioned your favorite songs, and then I'm trolling you and saying exactly those songs I hate.
Well, you picked the White Album,
Right.
and that is the out of the whole Beatles catalog, that is just the one that I can't. And it's hard to say. It's hard to say why. There are great songs on. I mean, it's the Beatles.
Yeah.
There's great songs on. I think the thing that bugs me is that non-Beatle fans always like the White Album. Maybe that's
Ooh.
what it is. They go, "Oh, I don't like the Beatles, but I like the White Album," and I'm always like,
Interesting. I don't think I've heard that much.
"Oh, really? I always did. Always heard that." But I don't know. It's not. The White Album is certainly not my cup of tea. Um,
Well,
on
I
the other
mean,
hand,
to me, it's like kind of cliche and pat to say Sgt. Pepper, and yet that tends to make the top of everyone's list. Now, I always had this feeling that Sgt. Pepper Magical Mystery Tour and the assorted singles that came out in '67 are, in a certain sense, all one piece. Like, that should have been their double album.
yeah,
And since they didn't do that, my defense of the White Album, I didn't know other people are saying that. I can see why people would say that. But for me, it seemed like White Album is where it was the last time they really tried. Now people will say, well, what about Abbey Road? They were phoning it in a certain respect. Oh, sacrilege. I didn't realize that when I was younger. But I mean, it's so polished and so perfect. It's almost like it's not even, they weren't even trying in a certain respect. Whereas White Album, even though it wasn't so psychedelic, except for a few spots like Glass Onion and stuff like that, they still kept pushing how far they could go. And the example for me is, Revolution Number 9, which people can't stand, but how far can you go with music? I mean, you go to where it's not music anymore. I mean, that's the farthest you can go. And they finally did. They wanted to test how far they could push the Beatles. Now, Lennon, on his first solo albums with Yoko and stuff, went even further, but you saw the results of that. No more number one. So it's like, it's like, and as soon as he returned back to general pop and rock music, well, he started hitting the top again. So.
see, for me, I don't. It for me the album isn't harmonious like some of the other albums, even before or after are. Now you mentioned Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour, and those two float in and out of being in my top two, 3 albums. Um, but I kind of saw it as like Let It Be. Even the movie, like people are always like, "Oh, they're so unhappy," and then the new one is going to be so much happier. But I mean, I think there was happiness in. I saw happiness in Let It Be, and I loved watching them play. My favorite scene in that whole movie is like when they're playing Maxwell's Silver Hammer,
Oh, yeah.
which ends up on Abbey Road, but Paul is walking them through the chords, and he's singing the melody, but he's going D D B B E minor da
Right.
da A7
Should have just left those
da
lyrics.
D D D A. I just love that. Like they're playing and you're seeing the process happen.
Right.
It's amazing. But my favorite was influenced by my brother. My brother Tony said to me one time, we were talking about, and he said the Hard Day's Night album is, he said it's perfect. It's better than anybody else's best of. Name a best of album that
Yeah.
has songs like you know, um, uh, Hard Day's Night, Tell Me Why, Can't Buy Me Love, um, and I Love Her, If I Fell. I mean, just one after the other of just home run, home run, home run, home run.
Yeah.
And you could, it's amazing. And they just crank that stuff out, you know?
Um,
Like,
yeah. I
and they
mean,
were just a bunch of kids. They were just a bunch of kids.
you know, I guess I look at it really much. Not saying you're not looking at it deeper. I mean, that's pretty deep already. Just to say they're the most harmonious, because I'll admit, White Album is probably their most disharmonious self. And it's probably because I went through so many years just of absorbing their solo albums and just loving the solo albums and just saying this is the obvious peak of what their powers were supposed to be, is to become solo. Not a popular opinion.
Right.
you know it just seemed like they finally got the freedom to do whatever they want, good or bad, right or wrong, and everything like that. And sometimes they succeeded, many times they didn't, but it is what it is. But the beginnings of that was with the White Album, which is why I kind of liked it for that reason. And if
Yep.
you're talking about harmonious, well, maybe they aren't so harmonious since they all four only play together on 16 tracks. But if you cut it down to just those 16 tracks, they actually are the most harmonious song of all 16, of all 30 tracks.
If you cut it down to 2 tracks and make it a 45, it's even better.
Okay. Oh, you probably like something on the White Album. More back in the USSR or something.
Yeah, there are great tracks on it. I mean, when you joke around, when you talk about something like this, and I talk about the White Album, it's still better than most people's best albums, you
Yeah.
know. But it's just when I compare it to the other albums, for me, it's always at the bottom of the heap. Always, it's always last place. And all the other albums kind of float in and out because, like, Plastic picked the Please Please Me album,
Yeah.
and there's just, you know, like when I think about that album, there's just some fantastic tracks on it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Meet the Beatles has fantastic tracks. Any of them, but I don't know why. I don't know why the White Album just doesn't do it for me. And
Well,
then
for me, that
favorite,
my actually,
but see, my least favorite Beatles song is on the Hard Day's Night album.
which is what? Which song?
When I Get Home.
Oh yeah, we talked about that too.
Yeah, it's just it's not it's out
But
of
you're
all of
talking about the British version, not the true American soundtrack. But
right, right.
yeah.
The out of the whole catalog, that song, every time I hear it, I go, ooh. Like the other ones I'll listen to and I'll go. I mean, there's great parts to the song
Yeah.
also. The vocal chord in the chorus is great.
Yeah.
But there's just some. I think the line about "I'll love her till the cows come home," that just kills me. It's just terrible.
Now, I mentioned Babies in Black, and you said them Spitenoids, and it's like, I will say why I don't like Babies in Black. Only because they insisted on playing it throughout their entire live career once they composed it, including through '66, when they should have just play something from Revolver, please. It's like, why are you playing this old one that wasn't even a single? It wasn't a hit. And yeah, okay, it's some sort of waltz thing, and you think you're being clever with black and white and blue and blah blah blah, and But that's why I'm like, and I wasn't really trying to be so thing. I was just like thinking about it. It's like, is there a Beatles song that I really don't like? And I was starting to go through all the records, and I was just like looking at them, and I said, I don't really like Babies in Black.
Wicked drum track. Just wicked good drum track.
Now, the one that Michael Ventrella attacked me on that I really don't like is, and it's for a different reason, is It's All Too Much. And you probably said you like it too. And the reason why is I just think it goes on too much. I think they could have shaved about a minute off on it. It would have been a sharper tune. And that's why I always say, yeah, it lives up to its title. It's all too much. It just keeps going and going and going. and there's even additional verses that were in the Yellow Submarine. It's like, Harrison didn't learn to edit yet. That was my take on that when he was doing those songs, because he did those songs for Yellow Submarine prior to White Album, prior to Abbey Road. It was almost like after they dumped his stuff on the Yellow Submarine soundtrack, he said, and didn't leave it on Pepper or anything else. He said, maybe I should learn how to edit my stuff. Blue Jay Way kind of goes on a little too long too, I think. I'll
I,
even admit Piggies goes on too long. That should have been like a Wild Honey Pie.
I, I, I really have to disagree with All Too Much. I love it. I love that they bring the brass in. They've got the feedback guitar and the organ at the beginning, and just the production of it. Now, the one for me the production one for me that I just kind of don't like, and I'm so sorry, Kit. Kit is the sweetest human being on earth, and I hate to do this to her yet again, and to Ethan, because I think it's his mom's favorite song.
Yeah.
But Tomorrow Never Knows. People say that that's their favorite Beatles song, and I say it's not even a Beatles song.
It's not my favorite, but I admire it for what it was trying to do. But if you're really going to go for what they were trying to do, I think he succeeded better with "I Am the Walrus," which is my favorite Beatles song of all time, bar none.
Really?
Yeah.
See, when I think of my favorite Beatles song, I kind of want the Beatles playing on the song, like together. Like
Well,
that's
weren't they
why
all
I
playing
think
on that one?
I
I mean,
are
yes,
they?
there was King Lear on there too, and a bunch of other shit. But
I mean, maybe they are, but it's pretty whacked out. I
well,
don't
that's
know.
why I liked it.
I like when they're singing harmonies and they're playing together
Yeah,
and it's just the four of
yeah.
them as a band. I mean,
Well, when
but
I
everybody's different.
yeah,
I don't begrudge anybody for
yeah,
their love of any of it. But I just for me, and I gravitate towards that kind of thing. The bands that I usually like because I've seen them live or seen clips of them live, and it's them playing. When I think of Bare Naked Ladies, I think of them playing live.
hmm,
When I think of NRBQ, I think of them playing live.
yeah.
When I think of the Beatles, I think of them playing as a band live. And
Okay.
even like some of the later tracks, on like Let It Be
Yeah,
and some of that stuff, it's still them playing as a band. The Rooftop, it's them
yeah.
playing, even with Billy Preston,
Yeah.
it's still those guys playing together. So,
And see, I became a fan in '77, and music from '67 to '77, although it changed, there's a lot of disco and stuff in '77. It didn't change all that much. I mean, groups stopped touring as much during the '70s. Even the Stones didn't tour every year. I think they tour more now than they did back then,
yeah,
barring the pandemic. And every kind of bought into the Beatles philosophy. It's like, well, this album is our performance. We're not going to perform live anymore. And Ringo did that for years, and I think that's why his chart action really disintegrated, because he wouldn't go on tour anymore until like the late '80s, when his career was done. On record. Because when he
right.
tours now, he plays all the old songs because he didn't have any hits after that. But that's okay. Um, my point is like, that's kind of when I got interested in music, and so I was interested in how the performance was on a record. I didn't like live albums much, and I thought that the early Beatles, especially if you go back to like Love Me Do, the first time I learned Love Me Do, I said, geez, when is this recorded? 1916 or something on a 78? It was like horrible. I love it now, but it just seems so antiquated compared to what I was listening to and what I was liking. And so I didn't even like 62 to 66, the Red Album. I like 67 to 70, and it's like later. Now I appreciate it, and I appreciate things like Hard Day's Night and stuff like that. But I remember I used to not.
That's and I can understand that. We're coming at it from two different places. I just when I think of all the bands that I like, a lot of times they're quartets, and a lot of times they're or quartets or quintets, and they come close to that Beatley, even Kiss, I
Yeah.
would say, in a lot of ways, and I'm not saying that they wrote like the Beatles or, but they certainly tried to follow the pattern.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I like live albums if the band is really good.
Yeah.
Um, obviously Kiss. I think that was the first. Alive 2 was the first like live album I ever got into
Yeah. And I'll
when
admit
I
that's
was
a good
young.
album. I'm not the hugest Kiss fan, but I like the album.
Yeah, well, because it sounds pretty. When you go back and listen to it now, you go, well, how can Paul Stanley be singing 16 times on a song, like at the same time? Oh, maybe they went into the studio and did some overdubbing on this.
Well, I wasn't
But
even thinking about that. I just thought it's a decent sounding live album. There's
yeah,
overdubs on Wings Over America, but I still think that's McCartney's best live album. So,
yeah, I like what was it was it Eddie Kramer who did the Kiss album, the Kiss Alive album?
yeah, I'm not sure.
And he said that they were trying to capture the spirit of what it was like to go to a Kiss concert, not capture the mistakes that were made during the single Kiss concert. So
Yeah, yeah.
when they do the overdubs and stuff, you still get that feeling of being there, but they bolstered the recording, they bolstered the crowd noise and everything else.
Since you tend to like live albums more, what do you feel is your favorite live album? And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be rock and roll, but it can be.
Probably still to this day, it's I think it's the album Digging Uncle Q by NRBQ.
Hmm.
That was the album that got me into the band, and oddly enough, it got me into the band. Like most of the album, I didn't understand. There were just stuff on it I didn't understand. I heard it and I'm like, this is terrible. And then towards the end of the album, they do Just the Way You Are by Billy Joel.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, this sounds great. Which I learned later, they they used to. So the band, and I don't know if you know much about those guys. They
I,
were a
I
New
know
England.
little about them, and that's what I was going to ask you about too. Is why the fascination with them?
Uh, so they were mostly based out of New England,
Yeah.
and they they're absolutely fearless. There aren't many bands that can go play the Newport Jazz Festival and play jazz like the jazz players, and then turn around and play at the Grand Ole Opry and play country like the country players. Um, if you listen to Bonnie Raitt ever talk about them,
Hmm.
every time she's talking about them, you can hear her voice crack
Hmm.
because she tears up a little bit talking about how much she loves the band.
Hmm.
And Elvis Costello and Keith Richards and even Paul McCartney is a Q fan.
Hmm.
Um, but I was saying that particular album. So one thing they used to do, this was in the early '80s, I guess.
Hmm.
Uh, Karaoke was becoming popular. So just as a goof, they would put the instruments down and they would play a karaoke track, and they would have these big, like pieces of paper with the words to the song written on it, and they would crowd around the microphone and take turns singing the song. Well, Just the Way You Are was one of those karaoke tracks. So
Hmm.
it wasn't even them playing, but I knew the song,
Right.
so I got into it. The keyboard player Terry Adams,
Hmm.
um, he is a monk devotee, so he plays rock and roll like Thelonious Monk played jazz. It's very far out there, and you think he's just banging on the piano with no rhyme or reason. But the scary part is if you listen to it enough, eventually that there's a click,
Uh-huh.
and you start to hear it the way he's playing it.
Hmm.
You start to hear his voice on the piano, and that world opens up to you, and you start to listen to other piano players, and you get bored because you know where it's going. With
Yeah.
him, you have no idea where it's going. And Joey, the bass player, let me give you an idea. Joey played on Hail Hail Rock and Roll. In the movie, he played with Eric Clapton. So Eric Clapton said, "Why don't you come and do some of the nights for me for 24 nights?"
Hmm.
So Joey flew to Royal Albert Hall and played with Eric Clapton. While he was there, Wix from Paul McCartney's band caught wind that he was going to be there, and Wix is an NRBQ fan.
Hmm.
So Wix called Paul and said, "Why don't we have Joey over to play with us?"
Hmm.
So while he was at Royal Albert Hall, he got a call that said, "Hey, you want to come over and play with Paul and his band?" Because Hamish wasn't in town. They're like, "You want to play in the studio with Paul McCartney and his band?" So he went over and played with Paul. And this is just like a, a week of the guy's life. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? He's just that kind of bass player. Everybody knows him and loves him.
Hmm.
Um, and then he was on the short list to replace Wyman
Right.
when Wyman left the Stones, and Richards really wanted him in the band, and so did Ronnie Wood.
Hmm.
But Mick Jagger didn't want somebody who played like Bill Wyman,
Oh,
and so they went with
Daryl. Daryl.
yeah, yeah,
Something.
yeah.
Yeah.
They went with him,
Yeah.
who's obviously fantastic.
Yeah.
But Joey was, I think Joey was on the short list. I mean,
Hmm.
certainly Keith wanted him in the band.
Well, definitely, if he was in that Hail Hail Rock and Roll, didn't Keith put that band together? Or
Yep.
Chuck Berry? I thought so.
Yeah, and Steve Jordan got the gig first,
Hmm.
and Keith said, "Well, who should we get for bass?"
Yeah.
And Steve said, "You got to come check out Joey Spampanato." So Keith Richards and Steve Jordan went to the Bottom Line
Hmm.
in New York to see NRBQ,
Hmm.
and they hired Joey for the movie. Yeah, and then Tommy Artolino on drums is like obviously a devoted Ringo fan, but so much more. And Big Al Anderson, if you know anything about Big Al Anderson, singer songwriter who was in the band during the classic period, and then went on to Nashville, and he's written for everybody. I mean, just he's a legend. He's a Nashville legend.
So
So,
what's considered the classic period?
like 74-ish to 94.
Okay.
They played New Year's Eve 94, and the band was known for um, uh, experimenting with things other than music. Uh, so I think Big Al had to leave the road because he needed to clean. He needed to get clean,
Mhm.
and the other guys ended up getting everybody got cleaned up. The funny thing is when I listen to the recordings of those guys,
Mhm.
you listen to the live tracks from that time period, and I just don't ever feel like you can hear the drug influence in people's playing, and it becomes not good.
Mhm.
I never heard it with them. Those
Hmm.
guys just were always on top of their game, and and I I, I love them. I
I'll
love
have,
that band.
I'll have to investigate further. The first time I ever heard about him, I had a roommate that listened to everything, and he mentioned them in the late '80s some point. And I don't know, he played some things for me, but he played a lot of different things for me, and I thought, it's good. But I didn't jump into it. But I was jumping into so many things. I mean, it's like I'm a huge Zappa fan. I'm a huge, whatever. And it's like, there's just so many things. And so it's really hard for me to continue to jump into, because I'm the type, I don't know if you're this way. If I suddenly like a group, I have to have everything they've ever recorded. I can't just say, "Oh, let me just buy this
Yeah,
now."
right now for me that's a band called McFly.
Hmm.
Have you ever
I
heard of
don't think I've heard
McFly?
of them. No.
So British band
Mhm.
from the early 2000s,
Okay.
and that's exactly how I am
Wait a
too.
minute.
Like
Wait a minute. I think a friend of mine talked about them, and they were going to. Is this the band that is big in Europe, and they were going to do their first American tour, and then COVID hit, and they didn't. Or am I thinking
No,
something?
no,
Okay.
because I think the band disbanded around like 2013,
Okay,
and
so it's
then
a different band than I'm
later
thinking
got back together.
of. Okay.
They were gigantic in England. They didn't really hit over here.
Yeah.
But when you listen to a lot of the music, when I hear it, I'm like,
Yeah.
this is it's are you familiar with jellyfish?
Yeah. Like Jolie.
So it's like jellyfish, but a little happier and a little poppier. You
Happier.
know? Yeah, well, if you really listen to the Belly Button album and you
Yeah.
read the lyrics,
Uh-huh.
there's some they go pretty dark.
Okay. I mean, I have that album, but I didn't think it was that dark. But okay, maybe
Oh
I'll
yeah,
read the lyrics. Okay.
go read the lyrics. Yeah, they go pretty dark. You know, baby's coming back is pretty lighthearted, and I would say a lot of the McFly stuff is kind of along that lines.
Okay.
But you know, there's some pretty dark stuff on that jellyfish. It's like Bare Naked Ladies. Bare Naked Ladies. When you listen to some of those
I know this
songs,
stuff in pretty.
they can be so dark, and
Yeah.
you listen to it and you're like, it's so poppy.
Yeah. Okay. I get what
Yeah.
you mean. I just thought they were playing dark as well, and I was like, it's like because I've told you. Oh, I said it on Facebook. I'm not really a lyrics person, so I'll get into something how a tune sounds, and then you'll say, that's talking about death and dismemberment. I didn't know that, because it's all.
Yeah,
you know.
I know, and that's how Bare Naked Ladies get you. You
Yeah.
start singing along to the songs, and you're like, well, wait a minute now.
Yeah.
This song is about suicide.
Yeah.
Wait, it's about there's they've got just a lot of the songs happen to be like with Bare Naked Ladies. A lot of the songs are about Ed Robertson's brother who died, and him like Ed feels like he's coming back and haunting him. So a lot of the songs are about his dead brother haunting him, and you're like, oh God, this is so weird, but it's so poppy.
It's like that other song. I don't know if you're familiar with it. That song called Timothy. Yeah.
No.
It's about cannibals. It's written by I forgot the group name they used, but the song's called Timothy. Look it up, and it's about cannibalism. And it's written by Rupert Holmes, the same guy who did the Pina Colada song later on.
Oh, okay.
And he's written a lot of stuff, but those are like the two main things he's known for. And if you ever listen to Gilbert Gottfried's show, his podcast, he's been on there a couple of times, and they've talked about these songs and stuff like that.
I love Gilbert and Frank.
Yeah.
Oh.
But anyway, look at that up. It's not by Rupert Holmes, but it's written by him, but it's a different name. But the song's called Timothy, so you can probably just find it that way. But listen to the lyrics, and you go, "Oh my God, this poppy song's about cannibalism."
Well, and that's like "Excitable Boy" by Warren Zevon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Zevon's the
listen-
same.
Oh my gosh,
come from
listen
the
to the
same
words.
cloth. Yeah.
Yeah. He dug up her grave and built a cage with her bones. I mean, it's really, really freaking dark. But the music's
Yeah. Well, there's
really
this other. It's more of a novelty song, but still, it can be poppy. Is "I Want My Baby Back," and look that
Baby
one
Back
up.
Ribs.
No, it's just it was long before Baby Back Ribs. Yeah, "I Want My Baby Back," and you hear this shoveling sound, and what he's doing is he's digging her out of her grave, and then he gets in the grave, and you're,
Oh, God.
and then the last verse, "I got my baby back."
I gotta check that out. I don't know if I know that one.
Yeah, it's called "I Want My Baby Back." I
So,
want my
Timothy?
baby back, but I don't know who did it off the top of my head.
Timothy and I Want My Baby Back.
Yeah. Those are two to look up on YouTube.
So
I do like the darker things too.
we got to do another panel show where we talk about all these poppy dark songs.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
be fun.
We can do that. I don't know if Plastic's ever heard of. Plastic's everything's bananas. I don't.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know how much time we have because it's like I usually can kind of gauge it. I would say, is there anything else we should talk about before we wrap it up?
Well, we didn't talk about the Monkees at all. Do you plan on going to the final tour, farewell tour?
I say with a big sigh. I live in Oregon. There are no Oregon dates.
Oh, really?
So if I go to one, I have to go all the way to San Jose, which is ironically where I'm going next week, but not for the Monkees concert. So, but that's 11-hour drive. So it's like, going the other way, I think they're playing Seattle, I think, and that's like a 5-hour drive. So I'm like, and it's not like I have to see them. I mean, oh, that's kind of sacrilege. It's like, oh, I should see them and support them on their final tour and da 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 da. I've seen them all together and separately. The only thing I've never seen, thanks Fred, you lucky dog, is all four together. But I've seen the two most popular combinations of the three, and each one solo. So I mean, and I saw Mickey and Michael at the Head 50th anniversary in LA in 2018. So at least I saw that, But
They're playing here in Orlando on Sunday,
yeah,
and I've never seen Mike. I saw
really, oh,
we used to see Davey at the Epcot uh, Flower Power every year. He used to play Epcot every year, and he lived in Florida.
mm-hmm.
And what a shame, he passed so young,
Right,
because I know people. He used to go. He must have lived in like either Stewart or Palm Beach, down in that area,
yeah,
because when they would do certain like weekend festivals in like Fort Pierce,
mm-hmm.
people I know would say, "Oh yeah, I saw Davy Jones. He was there."
Yeah,
So he would be around that area. Um, Saw Mickey quite a few times, and I got to see the three. I got to see Peter, Mickey, and Davy together in North Carolina in
mm.
2001. That was one of the few uh, really good memories. Other than eating Bojangles, one of the
Yeah,
really good memories of North Carolina was getting to see the Three Monkees.
mm.
But they're playing here this Sunday, and this is my internal struggle as a parent.
Yeah,
I I I recently had to walk away from a few of the bands that I was working with because my kids' soccer schedule just overtook our lives.
right.
And I'm like, well, I've just got to walk away for a little bit, not
Mm.
play, and I'll go back to it, when they're not playing as much soccer. Well, this Sunday is my daughter's game, and it's the Monkees concert. So, like
Wow.
my wife and I are still like negotiating, going, okay, how do we do this? How do we be in two places at once? But
Uh-huh.
we can't, So
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. What do I
Is that
do?
is that the only Florida location they're playing?
Yeah,
No.
as far as I know.
Yeah, because they're saying, can you travel? Or something. If there's another Florida location or something.
I think they were gonna do Georgia, and I think that the Georgia date got pulled out from under
Yeah,
them.
I know a few
Not
of them.
by
Yeah,
Yeah, not by
yeah.
their doing.
See, for me,
Um,
I've seen the Mickey Davy Peter configuration. I know I saw him twice. I seem to think I saw him 3 times, but I know first time in '87, and then
oh, that must have been great.
oh yeah,
That must have been great.
Weird Al was the opening act.
Even better,
Yeah,
Al puts on a great show.
yeah, and I've seen him a couple times separately too. Um, Michael, I almost saw then, but I chickened out. Well, I didn't chicken out. I was just mad at him because in '87 he went on a solo tour, and his tickets cost more than the Three Monkees, and it just pissed me off that he, as a solo artist, cost more. Now, I did eventually see him about 10 years ago, I think. Now, the other three is still Peter and Mickey, but with Michael this time, when they got together in 2013, I think it was 2013, yeah, first time. That was a no-brainer. I had to see him, and I didn't have any commitments like that, but I saw him. So that's the last time I saw the three. And amazingly, in that space of like a year, I saw each one of them separately, and that trio. I saw Davey at an autograph show. It wasn't really a concert, but at an autograph show in Hollywood 2 weeks before he passed away.
Wow.
I've said this story before when I saw him in the middle of February of 2012. I said, if they had bets on who would be dead by the end of this month, I doubt anybody would pick Davy Jones. Because they had Martin Landau, who was in Mission Impossible, he was getting pretty elderly. He was in his late 80s at the time or something like that. And they had what's her name? Carla Lemley, who was 105 at that show.
Wow.
She outlived Davy too by about 2 years. And it's like, geez, and it's like that's what was so strange about that show, because Davy was out there and he had a guitar that looked very similar to the one over your left shoulder. Just strumming away, he could play. It's just you never thought of Davy as a guitarist, but he could play, and he just sang just a couple tunes. Just whatever anybody was saying. This is the end of the show when the crowd is kind of thinning out, and so he could afford to just kind of be Davey, and it was really cool. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm glad I went to see him, because I almost didn't go see him. They said, yeah, I've seen Davey in concert, but my friend Greg, he says, yeah, but you've never gone to him face to face, and you didn't get his autograph. I go, true, I don't, so yeah, so it was fun. And I'm glad I did it now in retrospect.
Yeah, yeah. The shows he did it at Epcot were great. We used to go to the American Pavilion, and he'd be playing there, and you could get good seats, and
Yeah.
we would just stay the whole day and drink a few beers and watch Davy Jones. It was cool.
Well, we were talking about live albums we like. Davey Live, I think, is one of the best live albums, group or solo, of Monkees. If you get the one, it says a purple cover, and it shows like Davey behind the mic, kind of leaning into it like that. That's the cover. He has like the funniest stage banter. I mean, it's all him, no, but he plays like everything. He sings like every song, even all the Mickey ones, and it's like, it's just like, for me, it's like just perfection on a live album, just how he connects with the audience and everything.
I'll have to check it out. I know Monkees fans get mad at me when I say this, but I've seen the guys live, and they were good shows, but I never really like I never gravitated to any of the live Monkees albums.
Yeah.
And especially when it was, not oddly enough, when it was those guys playing live, when it was like Mickey on drums and Mike and Peter, just them.
Yeah.
I really didn't like it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the truth. On Monkees live albums, the best one, honestly, is the one that just came out, the Mike and Mickey show. They sing it great. Mike is still playing because, unfortunately, on this current tour, he's just singing.
Mike's a great guitar player. I don't mean to take anything away from Mike. And Mickey did a fine job.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want a good live album for the Monkees, get that one, and then get the Davey live. I mean, and then some of Peter's live albums, ways with Shoe Suede Blues are pretty good. He doesn't do too many Monkees tunes, but I mean, it's a different animal. You're talking about folk and that type of stuff, so.
That the band that they had, probably the band that you saw in '87, is probably the same band that played MGBGT, the live recording. On the.
I think '86 and '87 were the same band. It's just I didn't see him in '86 just because it was so crazy that year. I just said, I'm not even going to bother. And I didn't know if I was that committed of a Monkees fan, because my thought was, even though I had their albums, I was saying, oh, it's only 3 of them. And it's like, I want to see all 4. And, maybe Michael, and then Michael did join them on stage at the Greek, that one show. And I said, maybe he will tour next year. Well, he didn't. But I said, I'll see the Monkees. I like the Monkees. Screw it.
Yeah. That live song, and I think Peter's playing banjo on that, if I remember right. That that's a good recording. I when they were playing and they had the full backing band, I could see that stuff being really good, and especially anything they did off of the Good Times album.
Yeah,
I'm sure live. Any of those live
I would say
probably
the weakest live album is probably the '67 one, because it is just the band, and although they're good, they're not great. And there's a lot of screaming, so it's almost like the Beatles at Hollywood Bowl, even though I like Beatles at Hollywood Bowl better, but
what's fantastic is when they did, was it the Johnny Cash show?
Mm-hmm.
And they did, what'd they do? Was it some of Shelley's Blues?
Yeah, well, people have said who've seen it, the '69 tour that had Mickey, Davey, and Michael in it. was a really good show. And I wish, maybe there aren't any good recordings. I wish there was a live recording of it released.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like I thought I knew whether there is, but people say, oh yeah, there's kind of bad recordings of this and that and the other. And granted, it was at a time where nobody cared about the Monkees very much, so maybe they didn't record it.
Well, that I know that TV appearance where Mike is playing guitar and the three of them are singing.
Yeah,
That's really good. Like I could listen to a whole show
yeah,
of just that.
yeah.
You know, it's good stuff.
And then my favorite live album of all time is still the Who Live at Leeds, the full deluxe version. So if you like that, all right, we're in agreement on something. You like
So
it.
you're a Who fan, huh?
Yes, I am. But
Yeah.
I would say
Okay.
that's even better. That I'm more of a studio person, but I would say that album, that live album, is probably better than any of their studio albums.
So maybe you can explain something to me.
Okay.
Why does history seem to favor Led Zeppelin over the Who?
I think it boils down to one word: humor. Now, I love my musical acts, and I'll ask you this about NRBQ. Do they have a sense of humor?
They have, yes,
Okay,
yes,
then I'll probably like them. Because
gigantic sense of.
it's like what made me a Beatles fan wasn't that they played well, that they had the harmonies, the group, they composed great songs, is because they could do silly, goofy things like the Christmas records and "You Know My Name, Look Up the Number." Now, some people hate that stuff, but to me, that makes them more real. That's part of the reason why. Here's somebody I don't like and some people adore is like Bruce Springsteen. Boring. He doesn't seem to have a sense of humor. The only time I've ever heard of anything funny from him is his live version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And I go, yeah, that's pretty funny, for him, but
Right.
I think that's what it is that the Who gets a little goofy at times, and that and people lose respect. That's why they don't like the Monkees. They get a little goofy at times. And the Who, it's the Who Sell Out. The Who Sell Out is like a Monkees album. The Monkees could have done that easily if they had thought of that idea. When the Who got more serious, people took them seriously, but most hardcore fans say, "Oh, I can't listen to anything before Tommy because that was too silly," And whereas Led Zeppelin, generally, unless you're listening to something like The Crunge or something like that, or maybe Hot Dog or something like that, generally pretty straight stuff. No silliness. In fact, they get pretty dark in their straight stuff sometimes too.
For me, pound for pound, the Who were better musicians, better singer, better songwriter, better performers. There's just I don't understand why history looks so favorably on Led Zeppelin and seems to almost ignore the Who, when I just think that the Who were a better band. I mean, Daltrey versus Plant, give me a break. Entwistle versus John Paul Jones. Now, John Paul Jones was a good musician, but Entwistle.
Now, maybe this had something to do with it. Maybe it's because they didn't break up when they should have.
Maybe.
Like when Keith Moon died, they should have done like Led Zeppelin did when Bonham died. We're
now,
done.
Do you know who was vying for the drum seat when Keith Moon died?
It was a couple people, but Bonham was. Oh, it was Phil Collins.
Phil Collins.
Okay, I thought you were going to say Bonham.
He wanted that seat desperately.
Yeah.
And no.
Yeah.
No. But I think he did get to play with him, and he was Wicked Uncle Ernie in some of the the live Tommy show.
Yeah, they threw a few bones, and he hasn't suffered career-wise, so I'm not too. I don't shed many tears for old Phil Collins. He's been everywhere. No. He was in Hard Day's Night. He was in both Live Aids on both continents. I mean, he's done it all. So I don't shed many tears for Phil Collins' career.
No, no.
He was uncredited on All Things Must Pass 3 times. The original time, the reissue, and the current reissue. They still haven't mentioned that he was on that record.
Wow, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. He plays drums on it?
Yeah.
I
I don't
didn't
remember
know
which
that.
track, but he says he's on it, and George Harrison said he would correct it when he reissued it, and he didn't. And then when they did the recent reissue, it's still not listed. So either Phil Collins is lying, or you know,
If you haven't seen it, you got to see where Phil Collins talks about meeting Paul McCartney and how angry Phil Collins got because Paul was kind of belittling him a little bit, but Paul was ribbing him.
yeah,
You know, like I think Phil Collins asked Paul for his autograph,
yeah.
and Paul was like, "Oh, Phil, oh, are you a Beatles fan? Are you?" And he's just like, and Phil Collins got all ticked off about it, you know,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Paul McCartney's a jerk."
Get over it, Phil.
That's great. It's,
Actually,
God
if Paul
bless him.
did that, I would kiss his hand or something. I would say that's funny. I think
Oh,
oh, a
it's
Beatles fan,
hysterical.
oh yeah,
But you asked me if NRBQ has a sense of humor.
yeah.
Uh, Back with the classic lineup, they used to do a bit in their show called the Magic Box, and they had a box that they would pass around the audience, and the audience would put song requests in it,
Oh, okay.
and they would pull out the request, and no matter what was on the page, piece of paper, they had to play it.
No,
And if you can find live recordings of some of those bits,
yeah.
I mean, sometimes they would pull out something that was, obscure.
Well, was it like in Carson, remember they did Stump the Band all the time? Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of. I
They
mean,
they would, because half the time people would suggest something that nobody's ever heard of.
they would do stuff like "Yes, I'm Ready," and Big Al had to sing, the female part way up there. There's one where
Okay.
they do "Tell Me What You See" by the Beatles,
Hmm.
and it's hysterical because they don't know it. Maybe one or two of them will know it, and they
Yeah.
start playing it right, but it all disintegrates pretty
Yeah.
quickly. But it's hysterical.
But I mean, that's what it is. I mean, you talk about like your ultimate comedy band. We mentioned Weird Al. He's had the same players since he started,
Yep.
and he's always going to be considered a novelty act doing song parodies, even though he's much more. Like, here's one to check out if you haven't. The George Harrison tribute concert, and Weird Al does a straight live version of "What Is Life," and he sings his heart out, and perfect, no humor, just straight, and he's all "What is life?" And he's just singing it, and it's like, wow,
That's awesome. I'm gonna definitely check that
that one's
out.
on YouTube too. So yeah,
He's a fantastic musician, and
yeah,
when I saw him live, it took about 3 songs for me to convince myself that he was singing live because
yeah,
he was that good.
yeah,
It was just spot on, and I'm looking, I'm watching it, and I'm looking at my wife, and I'm going, I don't know, I don't think he's really singing that because it's just too perfect.
yeah,
And then by the third song, I heard some waver, and I went, no, that's live.
yeah,
And
yeah,
he works his rear end off on stage. I mean, he
yeah,
gets in all the costumes
yeah,
and the audience knows every
yeah.
response, and oh, it's so much fun.
So,
Weird Al's, and I was a fan of Al's for years and years, decades before I went to a show.
mm,
So when I went, I was blown away. It was awesome.
mm. I went. Well, I would have gone separately, but yeah, it just happened he was opening act for the Monkees. But I had already known that he had graduated from just being a simple accordion player on stage to actually doing like song parodies. And what really attracted me is he did parodies he didn't do on record, because either he didn't get permission, he likes to get permission from people and stuff like that. And so, you're talking about Led Zeppelin, he did like Whole Lot of Lunch, and I want to throw up on you instead of I want to make love to you, whatever.
But
So,
his style parodies, when he gets
oh yeah,
away from the actual song parodies, some of those are just,
oh yeah,
really, really good. One of my favorites is One More Minute with You.
oh yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I don't think that's a song parody. That's a style parody.
yeah. Well,
Isn't
it's
it?
like a doo-wop or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just like Dare to Be Stupid is a style parody of Devo, and
Yeah,
it's not a
that one's
song parody.
closer because it's trying to be a style parody. Because he basically does three types of songs: a straight parody, the style parody, like, and then just original compositions, which he's done, over the years too, that aren't
Mel
necessarily a parody, but I mean they're competently composed,
Melanie is a great song, and it
Yeah.
had to have been influenced by some of Warren Zevon's stuff because it's very similar in tone.
Mhm.
You know, where he's got this nice melodic song,
Right.
beautiful, but then the lyrics are just pretty pretty whacked
Yeah.
out.
Well, at first I was like, probably like everybody else, you just like the parodies, like Eat It or whatever, and then I got his first or second album, and he did this record called Gotta Boogie, which, you know, and I said, "Was this a parody of?" I don't like it. That was my first initial knee jerk reaction. And then I listened to it, and then he goes, "Got a boogie," and then he goes, "Got a boogie on my finger, and I can't shake it off," and I busted up. And then he went one step further and did just this crazy thing called Mr. Frump and the Iron Lung, which has nothing to do with any song styling or parody. It's just a funny song. And oh my God, the first time I heard it, I was really trying, I had to keep from wetting my pants. I was laughing so
I'm gonna have to check these. I'm gonna have
That's
to
on the
check this
first
out.
album. Yeah, I don't even think he sings any of these live anymore, but it's on the very first album. It's a very accordion based, but it's still. And then the big hit on that record album was Ricky, which is a parody of Mickey. It's
Sure.
like I Love Lucy, and then he did I Love Rocky Road. Those are the big hits, but you know
Right.
the the stuff that isn't hits by Weird Al is very worthy of investigation because you go, wow, and then when he does polka medleys, which he does on pretty much every one of his albums, they're incredible because
Yes.
he'll do like Rolling Stones polka medley, and it's all the Stones hits, and then he'll do like his most recent one. He did the Hamilton polka, and if you haven't seen Hamilton, it doesn't make much sense. Which is the first time I heard it. Then I finally saw Hamilton, and then re-listened to it. And I go, this is incredibly funny. So you have to kind of know it to the original source
Did you
material.
see a touring show of it, or did you go
No,
to
I
New
saw
York?
it just on Disney Plus.
Oh, okay.
Because they had it free. And I said, all right, let's see what all the hubbub's about. And I go, I actually liked it. It's not too bad, So,
So my daughter is a gigantic Hamilton fan.
yeah,
I have not seen it yet,
okay.
but the person who does sound for Hamilton, who won the Grammy for sound for them, is Justin Rathbun,
Oh, okay.
who I went to high school with, and he was in my band in high school.
Yeah.
So like we were good buddies in high school. He was a year 1 year before me, I think, or 1 year behind me, I think.
Yeah.
And then I found out that he was running sound and the sound engineer for Hamilton,
Hmm.
and it's amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to like it, but my sister was raving about it. She goes, it's actually better than you thought. You'll like it. And I go, really? Okay. And so she came to visit once, actually during the height of the pandemic, but nothing happened. And we had Disney Plus, and it was free. And I said, well, I was just going to watch it. Let's watch it. And her daughter had already seen it. My niece has already seen it like 10 times. And she's like, memorized all the lyrics. And so she's singing along, which
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't mind, but it's like, I hate to say this, but I actually really liked it. I was like, wow, to my sister, it's like, but it was better than I expected. I wasn't expecting it to be the worst thing ever. I was just expecting it to be, this is another trendy thing that people like, and it's okay, but it's actually really good, and it, has interesting characters and interesting songs, and okay.
I have to check it out. My daughter is one of those who walks around the house singing all the lyrics to it, and so I've probably heard all the songs
Yeah.
at least through
So,
her.
so then when you're done, listen to the Weird Al Hamilton polka, which is only available online. He never put a record out of it, but then you go, makes sense now,
I'll definitely check that out.
All right. You'll have to listen to all this whole show over again to play back all the songs. Oh yeah, Timothy and
Yeah.
okay. I want my baby back, and and Hamilton polka. There we go. And let's see what else. Oh, well, let's just wrap it up. I mean, I can have you on the show again. This is fun. But
Well, thank you. So you, it's always wonderful being on any of those shows that we do together.
I try to make it
Uh,
fun.
when you're on it, you have a great sense of humor. You are wonderful at being in the joke, and sometimes when the tables are turned on you, like when Charles Rosenet turns the tables on you, you handle it so well, and
Try.
I've always appreciated that about you. I really have, because not everybody can do that,
Yeah.
and you do it, and because you understand that it's all in great fun and done with great love.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me on your show,
Sure.
and I'm happy to know you. I'm sorry that it took a worldwide pandemic for us to know each other,
Hey, that's
but
fine.
I'm glad we do.
Okay. Well, to wrap things up, I always do this with every guest. Just how do people get a hold of you? Any concerts to plug, any appearances to plug, soccer games to plug, any websites to plug, anything to buy. If you don't have anything, that's fine.
You know, I'm reevaluating everything right now. I was a part of a few projects that I thought might go somewhere, and then it turns out that they're going somewhere without me. Um, but that's not a bad thing. A lot of them are just things that that look like they're going to turn into things that are bigger than I could be a part of. You know, because I have a family here in Florida, I can't tour for weeks or months at a time. Um, you can always go check out the band Beatlebeat if you're in Orlando, or if you're go online, check out Beatlebeat, beatlebeat.com, or find them on Facebook, and you'll see during the pandemic we did concerts from my house. So if you like Beatles music, you could throw it on and listen to four more guys playing Beatles music.
Hey.
Uh, um, but the guys I work with they're top notch, and I love working with them. I'm gonna miss working with them over the next few months, but you never know what'll happen. I just had to take a step back at this point.
Right.
I'm hoping to do more stuff like this, where I'm doing online collaborations
Yeah.
and a few things, just until my kid's soccer schedule gets,
Right. Right.
under control, and then I'll hopefully be back out there. But right now, you have to. They're only going to be this age once, so I got to be around for it. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. And
But
how old are they? Just since you've mentioned.
I've got, my daughter is 12, my son is 8, and my other son is 6.
Okay, so right in the
So
prime. Yeah.
they're all three of them are in the school band, French horn, trumpet, and percussion.
Cool.
All three of them are playing soccer. Two of them are in choir, and the third one will probably join the choir by the end of the year.
And
So,
since TV show The Cosa family.
well, I did try and con my wife into having one more. I'm like, a quartet. We could have a quartet. So we're gonna have to pull a cousin in, a cousin Oliver or something, bring them in to play
Right.
the other instrument. But I, I'm hoping they get to the point where they're like, where I try to go in and play with them, and they're like, "No, Dad, you go. We're playing. Go." You know, I can't wait for that day. I can't wait to see it.
All right. Well, thank you, Charles, for being my special guest this week on Fun Ideas Podcast. It was a blast. We'll do it again, and we'll get more fights about what songs are the best. But
You
I'll
know
check
what?
out NRBQ, and you check out the things I told you, and we'll talk soon.
Definitely.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye.